Far Cry has always lived or died by its villains. Sure, the chaos and fun of the open world gameplay is at the core of why Far Cry is a successful franchise, but when you think back on the series, it's the faces of the bad guys you end up remembering. When a Far Cry villain works, they give the whole game meaning. They become the reason you push forward, the reason the world feels hostile or unpredictable, or even strangely magnetic. And when they don't work, the entire experience starts feeling hollow. You feel the script bending over itself trying to convince you that you should be scared or impressed, even when you're not. And that's the case with Miki and Lou, the twin warlords of Far Cry New Dawn. On paper, they're supposed to stand as the future of the franchise, a new direction, a new tone, a new kind of threat. But when you spend time with them, you start noticing the cracks, the missed beats, and all the things that should define them as memorable, but never really land. So today, I want to look at what makes a Far Cry villain work, and why Miki and Lou end up as the weakest in the series. Not in a haha let's roast them for clicks kind of way, but in a real breakdown of what went wrong. Because the franchise has delivered some genuinely fantastic villains, ones that didn't just intimidate you, but shaped the way you feel about the world around you. And Miki and Lou are the perfect example of what happens when Far Cry forgets how to do that. There's a certain electricity to a good Far Cry villain, a sense that the moment they appear, the game's tone shifts around them. They walk onto the screen and everything suddenly feels sharper, more dangerous, and more unpredictable. And the series has proven more than once that it knows how to create those moments. Vaas, Far Cry 3's villain, which I would also rank the highest on the Far Cry baddie list, works because he never feels safe to be around. You can't predict him, and that unpredictability gives every scene its own tension. Even when he's calm, there's something coiled underneath, and the game knows how to build scenes around that energy. He feels hypnotic with every line of dialogue, and his delivery, brought to life by the amazing Michael Mando, cemented Vaas as one of the most memorable villains in gaming history, let alone Far Cry. Pagan Min works for almost the opposite reason. Troy Baker delivers a composed, stylish, and almost disarmingly polite performance. He doesn't need to shout or wave a gun in your face. His confidence is the threat. There's an ideology behind the charm, a belief that he's the only adult in the room and everyone else is an inconvenience. That combination of elegance and violence gives him texture and makes him feel real. And Joseph Seed works because he's grounded in a conviction that feels genuine. You don't have to agree with him, you're not supposed to, but you can understand where his worldview comes from. His calmness isn't an act. His menace is woven into the things he believes, and that sincerity makes him unsettling in a way that sticks. What also works wonders in Far Cry 5 is that in the end, Joseph Seed was actually right. And if you want to dive deeper into Joseph Seed and the whole story behind the game, I made an hour-long retrospective of the game that I think you should check out. All these villains leave lasting marks on their respective worlds. The narrative bends around them. Missions, set pieces, even quiet moments all orbit their personalities. When they speak, it actually matters. When they step onto the screen, the game knows how to frame them so their presence lands with weight. Far Cry is at its best when its villains are more than just obstacles. In other words, every Far Cry villain that works, you simply love to hate. And Miki and Lou, who? I'm only kidding, but it's also kinda the point of this video. The two sisters never quite managed to reach that bar that was set before them. On the surface, Miki and Lou feel like a natural evolution of Far Cry. After years of dictators, cult leaders, and warlords with personal philosophies, the idea of two young, charismatic raiders running a post-apocalyptic frontier has potential. New Dawn's world is rebuilt, messy, and stitched together from whatever survived the apocalypse. It makes sense that the people running it wouldn't look or behave like the villains we've seen before. The concept is strong enough as well. Two sisters raised in a world with no structure, no history, and no consequences. They're the leaders of a mobile army, violent, confident, loyal to each other in a way that's supposed to be both intimidating and tragic. But the moment you meet them, something feels off. And it's not the voice actors, they give the material everything they can, it's the way the game frames them. The way it tries to sell them as unpredictable and dangerous without giving you any real reason to feel that danger. Their introduction goes for shock instead of real tension. Unfortunately, Miki and Lou feel like characters pretending to be villains, relying on loudness, attitude, and quips instead of any real presence. The world doesn't bend around them the way it does with Far Cry's stronger antagonists. They exist in the story, but they don't shape it. A good Far Cry villain carries scenes just by being there. You feel the weight of their decisions, the reach of their influence, the danger in the silence before they speak. Mickey and Lou never quite get that moment. They don't have the framing, the build-up, or the script support to feel like a force that defines the world. Every time they appear, it feels like the game is telling you they're dangerous instead of showing it. Their presence just doesn't create enough tension, just some background noise. Even their cruelty feels weightless because nothing in the game reacts to it in a meaningful way. I always felt their power doesn't feel earned, and Far Cry villains don't need complex ideologies to work, but they need clarity. Vaas wants control of his island, Pagan Min wants stability through his own twisted order, and Joseph Seed wants to save people by controlling them. Mickey and Lou want to stay in charge because being in charge gives them resources and mobility, and that's about as deep as it gets. Their motivations are built on a single idea: survival through dominance, and the game never quite explores it beyond the surface. There's no long-term vision, no internal conflict, no philosophy that gives them some weight. You're left with characters who feel like they were written to be cool villains, in quotes, not people with histories or convictions. And it's not as bad as something like the Saints Row reboot, but it's a... oh my god, I'm actually doing it. It's a far cry from what we were used to in terms of writing. Sorry about that. Far Cry villains usually give you something personal to push against. Vaas attacks your identity, Pagan challenges your loyalty, Joseph tests your sense of morality. Mickey and Lou don't offer that. They never get under your skin, they never raise the stakes in a way that feels personal or psychological. They're just violent, but their violence doesn't carry emotional consequences. It's just spectacle without substance. The best Far Cry villains, they make you feel something. Fear, anger, fascination, even sympathy sometimes. Mickey and Lou leave you with almost nothing. Far Cry New Dawn has a very specific aesthetic, bright, colorful, almost hopeful in places. Mickey and Lou are pitched as gritty, edgy, and nihilistic, and these two tones never blend. Instead of feeling like leaders shaped by this new world, the twins feel copy-pasted from a completely different game. The setting around them is vibrant, but they act like they're starring in a darker, meaner story. It creates dissonance rather than contrast. In my opinion, Far Cry New Dawn needed a way more colorful villain, because a villain is only as strong as the world that responds to them. Far Cry's best antagonists feel powerful because the game frames them that way, through mission design, player interactions, and the way the world changes under their influence. New Dawn doesn't do that for Mickey and Lou. If anything, it actually makes them feel smaller. The mission structure works against them. You spend far more time scavenging, crafting, upgrading, and hopping between outposts than you do actually dealing with the twins. They don't really interrupt you. You can go hours without hearing their voices, and when they finally cut back in, it feels like the game remembered it still had villains to put on screen. Even their big moments, the ones meant to make you hate them, don't land with weight because the pacing doesn't give those scenes space. You get a burst of violence, a threat, a speech, and then the game sends you back into a loop of crafting ethanol and capturing outposts. Whatever emotional momentum the twins were supposed to build evaporates as soon as the HUD reappears. Far Cry 3, 4, and 5 built tension by letting their villains step into the player's path. Vaas kidnapped you. Pagan Min interrupted your escape. Joseph Seed and his family also kidnapped you mid-mission like 10 times during that game. These villains were woven into the rhythm of the game, but Mickey and Lou feel separated from it. They're characters you watch in cutscenes, not forces you feel in the world. And without that presence, they never become the threat the story needs them to be. What makes Mickey and Lou frustrating isn't that they're terrible ideas. The sisters' loyalty to each other could have created real internal conflict. They could have disagreed on leadership, on strategy, on how to deal with the player, for instance. That dynamic alone had the potential to elevate them beyond simple raider bosses. The idea of a post-apocalyptic warlord duo could have been tied directly into the world's themes: rebuilding, survival, the clash between old world morality and new world necessity. There's a version of this story where the twins aren't just villains, but symbols of what humanity becomes without history to guide it. They could have had moments of quiet, moments of reflective cruelty, moments where their worldview made sense even if it was twisted. Far Cry's best villains earn that level of nuance, and the series is capable of delivering it. but New Dawn rushes through every potential beat. It touches the surface of interesting ideas without ever exploring them. And all these missed opportunities pile up until you're left with two characters who should have defined the tone of the game, but end up feeling like a placeholder, an idea that never found its final form. Mickey and Lou aren't the worst Far Cry villains because they're loud, or because they're young, or because New Dawn took a risk with its tone. They're the worst because they represent a version of Far Cry that forgets what made its antagonists matter in the first place. The series built its identity on characters who could carry a story just by stepping into the frame. Characters with presence, conviction, and the point of view that shaped the world around them. Far Cry villains used to define the emotional backbone of the game. Mickey and Lou never get the chance to do any of that. In the end, they're a reminder of how delicate Far Cry's formula really is. The world can be vibrant, the combat can be fun, the exploration can be engaging, but if the villain at the center doesn't land, the entire experience starts drifting and becomes forgettable. And that's why the twins stand out. Not as interesting failures, not as misunderstood characters, but as the point where the series' biggest strengths slip through its fingers. Far Cry Best's antagonists are unforgettable. The worst ones barely leave a trace. And Mickey and Lou, well, they leave just enough of a trace to remind you how much better this series can be.